never quite understand why people stop crocheting in the warmer months, because there's still a lot of things that you can crochet that's really fun, really cute, really practical, and easy to use. Or easy to crochet, I think is what I was trying to say. Amigurumi is one of my favorite projects to crochet in the spring and the summer because they're super portable. You have a bunch of little pieces that you crochet whenever and wherever you please, and you put them together and create an adorable little creature. This is Layla, one of my favorite patterns of all time that I've ever created. Well, there are a lot of steps involved, and there are a lot of stitches involved in this bunny, and if I were to put that in a step-by-step tutorial, it'd be like 3 hours long, and I don't think you want to watch that. So I say jokingly that you won't actually watch a 3-hour tutorial, because I think that that's probably true, but what I want to do in this video is meet you halfway. I don't want to show you every single monotonous stitch of how to crochet this bunny because, I mean, that would be super boring. What we'll do in this video is highlight all of the techniques that you need to crochet this bunny. There are some increases, some decreases, the putting on the face, the attaching everything together, the assembly. Aside from the techniques, I just want to demonstrate that you can easily substitute whatever yarn you want. Typically, this pattern calls for Patons Classic Wool Roving. I had to think about that for a second. That's what this purple one is made in. This is another option that I wanted to play around with. This is Re-Spun Thick and Quick. I used this in a project last fall and just really fell in love with it. I think it would be a great substitute for Layla here. Re-Spun Thick and Quick is a number 6 bulky weight yarn, so the bunny is going to be bigger than this one, and I'm totally cool with that. Now, if you want to use a medium weight yarn, you can absolutely do that. I would say drop down to a 4.5 and see how that looks with your tension and your stitches. If you see any like open gaps or airiness, you'll want to drop down again to a smaller hook size. That way you don't see the stuffing through it. So every single body piece that you make for this bunny is crocheted starting with the magic ring. So the magic ring is one of those techniques where it's really good to know. You can get around it in a lot of situations and you don't always have to use the magic ring, but for Amigurumi, I think this technique is by far the best because it minimizes the hole completely that you see, and you just have a neater looking piece that's not going to have any stuffing popping through. So this is the most fiddly part. Like, figuring out how to hold all of this in your hand at once is by far the hardest part. But once you get your hook to this position, you can pinch this off right here and sort of let go. And as long as you keep the tail along this ring right here, you're good to go. You do have to work over that tail because otherwise it won't work. But I typically just put it in my hands like this with my 2 fingers, sort of holding that loop open and pinching this between these 2 fingers so I continue to work over it. And 6 single crochets is the starting point for I think every single one of these body segments. So once you have this memorized, you can start any of the pieces of this bunny. Now I'm working on the ears here because those are the 2 pieces that I have left to crochet, but yeah, they all start this way. And if you pull on this tail and sort of hold this together like this, that ring will fasten up. Give that a nice tug, and that's your first round, and that's your first big technique for any amigurumi project, but especially for this bunny. So to work in a spiral, you'll insert your hook just through the first stitch, and I am going to single crochet because single crochets, those are the only stitch that we're going to use for this entire pattern, and I will mark that stitch so I know. So when I say an increase, and this is just me saying an increase, not what's actually shown in the pattern. An increase is just putting 2 single crochets into 1 stitch. But now the pattern will have it written, it'll say specifically make 2 single crochets in the next stitch. Now you might be wondering, why on earth do we only have 2 increases in this round when typically it's very common to have an increase in every stitch on the second round of any crochet project? Well, the reason for that is we're not trying to create an actual circle. If you look at these ears here, it's a little bit more of a cone shape instead of like, you know, what a true circle or round would look like as it's flattened. So whenever you're increasing to create a shape like that, something that's more of a cone, you put fewer increases. And if you put them exactly opposite of one another, you get a true cone shape. So that's what we did here. Now for the other body pieces, you'll see if I pull the arm in here, this is a true circle. We increased normally here, so in every stitch on this second round. And so if I flatten this out, you'll see it's more of a round shape like you would expect. So that's why the ears are a little bit different here. I don't know if you've ever noticed, but single crochets look different on the front than they do the back. So when you're crocheting with single crochets in the round, the natural tendency, I think, for the yarn to curl is like this. And if I were to continue crocheting with it like this, the front, which is the side of the stitch that you're looking at as you crochet it, is on the inside. Now you can continue to crochet like this, but what that's going to do, I have two here. What that will do is put the front side of your single crochets on the inside of the ear, and we don't technically want that. So what I will do is roll this out so that I'm crocheting around the outside of the circle instead of crocheting around the inside of the circle. It's not a big deal. It's something that you will almost certainly recognize because the stitches look quite a bit different on the back than they do the front. So if you're comparing to pictures or tutorials and your stitches look a little bit weird or different, that might be what's going on. So just flip it the other way and you're good to go. So we're still working on the ear here, and we have the first 13 rounds completed. This makes up the increasing section of both of the ears, and now we have just a repeat that's just single crochet. So super simple, but there is a little trick I wanted to show you. So rounds 14 through 20, we just single crochet in every stitch, and you can keep the stitch marker right here and move it along every single round, but then you have to remember where round 13 ended. So what I like to do is pull this out. I'll make my first stitch of round 14, and instead of marking it up here, I'll mark the front of the stitch. So that way I know that this is round 14, and as we add to it, I can count up from there, and it just makes it a lot easier. So obviously a 3-hour tutorial or whatever it would end up being to show this bunny step by step on YouTube just wouldn't work. I would say not everybody needs that level of detail, and this video that shows the techniques would be perfectly fine for them. But this bunny can be crocheted by somebody who's still relatively new to crochet, but that person would need a little bit more information and they would need to see a little bit more detail on how this bunny is crocheted. So what I've been thinking is still continue to do the videos here on YouTube like normal, but offering a workshop experience so that the people who do need a little bit more information, a little bit more hand-holding, a little bit more detail and step and just instruction, well, maybe the workshop would be perfect for that person, because not only will they see everything step by step in the workshop, but they'll also have access to me to be able to ask questions if they get stuck. If a workshop type of thing would be helpful for you, or you think it would be helpful for other people, then yeah, it might be something I seriously consider doing in the near future. So remember, this was round 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20. We can move this marker now. And so the next technique we'll look at is the decrease for this pattern. Now, there's a little trick that I like to use, and it's not anything I came up with. It's something that's actually really common in Amigurumi, and it was one of those things that I really slept on it for a while. Like, just, I don't know. I knew about this technique and I just never thought that it would be as good as it is. And I tried it and was like, man, what have I been doing for all of these years? The decrease in this pattern is a standard one that you may have already heard of before. It's a single crochet two together, super simple, basic decrease for using single crochet stitches. But the cool part is where you put your hook or the loops that you use as you're making the stitch. So typically we would use both loops of the stitch to work the decrease or work whatever stitch. That's what we've been doing the whole time. But the invisible decrease, and that's what this is sometimes called, invisible single crochet two together, you use just the front loop only. So insert the hook, pull up a loop on that one, and then do so in the next stitch over because it's a single crochet two together. So this is the second or the two part of that equation. And then yarn over and pull through all the loops on your hook. So when you do it that way, it doesn't look any different from the outside because you're using that outer stitch, or that outer loop rather, of the stitch. But what's going on in the background is the loops that are left here, they're stuck in that same position. So the gap that would normally be created right here and right here, they're hidden by the loop that was left over. Next, let's look at changing colors. So on the bottom of the feet here, we have a color B option, and it's totally optional. You don't have to do this, but if you do want to, I want to show you how to make that color transition. And I'm just realizing I have to cut some yarn to do that. Let's see if I can find the center pole here, and maybe I can get away with not cutting the yarn. Finding the center pole is really not an easy task. It is working in my favor that this is big yarn and I can literally stick my whole hand in it. It's just finding that center. Am I getting lucky? Oh my gosh. Oh, that never happens. I can't even believe I just stuck my hand in there and found it. So here I have the start of the foot. And again, this was crocheted basically with the same techniques that you've already seen, but we need to change colors right at this point in the pattern. And there's a really easy way that you can do that. So this is the last stitch of this round, and I'm actually going to pull part of it out because this is a nice clean way of changing colors. You will see a bit of a jog, and that's totally fine. I'm not super worried about that. But the main thing you want to have is 2 loops on your hook, and then I will loop this around. You can make a slip knot here if it would make you feel a little bit better, but we'll tie it off anyway, so it doesn't matter. Place that on your hook and pull it through the 2 loops to finish the stitch. So here you can trim the color that you're breaking, and I like to just go ahead and tie this off now, and then I don't have to worry about it later. The other cool thing about Amigurumi is you really don't have to weave in ends. We'll just tuck these on the inside and it just adds to the stuffing. That's the main thing I wanted to show you with the leg, is the color change. So I will finish crocheting this leg a little bit later, so you don't have to watch that. The next thing I want to move on to is the face. I like to add the face before I get too far into it. So for the nose, I like to use the contrast color. You could really use any color that you want, or you could even use like a safety nose if you can find a big enough one. So cut yourself a piece that's a few feet long. So that way when you double it over, you've got enough room to work with. So run it through. I like to make the nose at least as tall as the first round is, but we can add to it if we decide we want it to be a little bigger. So I'm gonna take the needle, run it straight through again. So try to work your needle through that same hole, and then you can start the other point of your nose. Let's see. I'm gonna play this a little cautious because you can always add to it. It's really not easy to make it smaller if you've gone a little too far with it. Go. Come back through the bottom and then just fill in these gaps. This is why I like to double the yarn, because it just makes it that much quicker, but it also makes it a lot neater. You can get to a point where you've gone through this center point so much that it kind of just looks really funny. So we do want to avoid that. That's pretty good, actually. I'm okay with that. It's not like a perfect triangle, but it's pretty close to our little example bunny here. And that's the nose. Easier than you might think, right? Next, we have the eyes. I got this safety eye set from Amazon a while back. So with this set, you have the solid black ones, which is what the original bunny had, but we also have some that have, you know, like a black center and a color on the outside. We can do blue eyes. I love blue, so that might look kind of funny, actually. I don't know if I like that. What about the brown? Brown makes sense. So the brown is a good option. What do we say? Do we like the gold? We like the gold better? Definitely not a fan of the green on the green yarn. Or we could just go the safe route and just use solid black. Let's use the brown. Let's do something a little fun and different. It's probably not what I would normally pick, so I'm going to use it. This is by far the hardest part. I usually have to have my husband help me with this, so we'll see if I'm able to do this on my own. Now the positioning of the eyes is everything. Too close together and it'll look funny, too far apart and it'll look funny, too close to the nose and it'll look funny. Like, you gotta play around with it a little bit to see where it looks best. I went up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So between the 5th and the 6th round is where I put like the level that I put them at. And they are roughly kind of following the triangular shape of the nose up. So between 5 and 6 and up from the point. It's pretty good, actually. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6 up from the point. These safety eyes, I think you can technically remove them, but it's really not easy to remove them. So I would say put a lot of time into making sure you have a placement that you're happy with, because yeah, I mean, it can just really be the difference between a cute bunny and a bunny that looks kind of funny. You know, it's funny, I'm looking at it like this and it looks too close together, but then I look at it in the camera up there and it actually looks kind of good. I think I'm gonna scoot it out a teeny bit more. This is by far the hardest part in the entire pattern. Just making sure your face looks good. I mean, I'm pretty happy with that, I think. Getting these backs on, like, honestly, is really, really difficult. I feel a little bit like a genius here. I needed to make the hole a little bit bigger so I could easily slide it on. And I'm using a knitting needle to try to make that happen. I don't know, let's see if it worked. Perfect little tool to help these safety eyes go on easier. Yeah, pretty good. For now, I'm pretty happy with that placement. I think we did good. So although I have a lot of these little body components already completed, they're all pretty much crocheted in the same way. They all start with the magic ring, which you saw how to work at the very beginning. They all use some number of increases and decreases to be able to shape them, which you also saw. The feet, we have the color change, and that's pretty much it. That's the basic construction of all of the body components. One of the trends that I always see every single year is so many people stop crocheting in the spring and the summer, and I don't understand why. I mean, I get why. A lot of times we are more busy in the spring and the summer. We've got spring break and we've got maybe some vacations and just nicer weather in general, so we like to be outside. But your hobby doesn't just stop being your hobby. Like, it doesn't stop bringing you joy. And that's why I crochet projects like this with, you know, little segments to it that are super quick and easy and portable. I can take these on a road trip if we're going to do that. I can take these outside on my patio and enjoy the sunlight, but still enjoy my hobby. You know what I mean? Now, another really cool tip related to the invisible decrease is not what happens while you're decreasing, but the round after. There's a hole that's pretty visible right there. Now, this yarn does a really good job of hiding it because it's kind of lofty. It has a little bit of a halo to it. So if I single crochet just in my normal placement where I've caught both loops, I'm doing nothing but opening that hole up to be even bigger, and then we can potentially see some of the stuffing through it. So instead of doing that, what I like to do is kind of take that invisible decrease tip where we just work in the front loop only and do that on the round, or well, just any normal single crochet that's over top of a decrease. I like to work it this way. So you can see right here, I've caught just the front loop and the hole is already hidden. And that's because it's the loop that I left unworked behind is filling in that gap. It's so much better. It's a really simple, quick, easy thing that you can do that will really just make a world of difference. So it's been a couple of days, but we have all of the pieces of Layla complete and we're ready to assemble it. Even though you're doing a lot of the same skills over and over, without having it laid out step by step, I don't want you to be confused or feel lost or anything like that. So this bunny is made up of 8 complete parts. We have 2 arms, 2 legs, a body, 2 ears, and a head. And although each body piece looks very different from one another, they're all made up of the same exact techniques. You start off with your magic ring, you'll increase to a certain point, and you'll incorporate some decreases and some rows where you don't decrease to do the shaping. So while the pattern is different for each one of them, just know that those core techniques are exactly the same. Now, the stuffing part is generally really straightforward with Amigurumi projects. You just want enough stuffing in there to give it some structure. But there is a fine line between not having enough and having too much stuffing in your projects. Obviously, if you overstuff it to the point where it's kind of bursting at the stitches, you're gonna see some of the white through your stitches. Now, I'm not super worried about that with this yarn because it is so thick and I used a small hook and it's really dense on its own. But that's something to think about if you're using other yarns for this project or just other Amigurumi projects in general. The other thing I wanted to mention is the ears. You actually don't stuff these. You will just flatten them out and we'll attach them just like this. When it comes to the arms, you'll want to stuff all the way down at the bottom, but really thin your stuffing out up here and basically don't stuff the last, I don't know, maybe 1.5 inches or so, because we're gonna sew this onto the body, and if it's lacking some stuffing in this general area right here, it will lay so much nicer on the body. Whereas if you were to stuff this completely and sew it on, it's gonna stick out from the body just straight out. You know, the head is going to look really funny until you get the ears attached. That's when it all comes together and it really starts to look cute. So if you're a little worried that it kind of looks more like a mouse right now than a bunny, you're not alone. This totally looks like a mouse head. You can do a drawstring closure to help close up this little hole that we have left, and that would be essentially just taking the tail and weaving it in and out of each stitch, and do that all the way around. I'm just catching the outer loops here too. Do that, and then this one. And then when you pull on that, it'll fasten it up a little bit. And that actually does a really good job of closing everything, but we can still do a little bit more tidying here. That's pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. So once you get the closure how you like it, I typically will just run the needle. Actually, I'm going to do it towards the back and like the outside. Just run it in through the middle and like pop it out anywhere on the head. Pull that through and then just trim that off, and it's lost in there forever. So another little trick with amigurumi and sewing them together that goes a really long way is if you have locking stitch markers, use them as like a safety pin, I guess, to attach the limb to where you want it to be. So with this, you do want to catch both layers of your arm piece, but then also the layer of the body. For the outside one though, I just catch the outer loop. I think that generally looks a little bit neater, and you can catch both loops or one loop on the arm. Do catch both loops of the body stitch though. And then we can just move this guy out of the way. Now some of this seam will be hidden when you attach the head. So if it doesn't look perfect, don't stress out too much. See, this is why it is such a good idea to not stuff like this whole section of the arm, because it just lays nice and flat to the body. All right, so we can set the body piece aside for just a second, and now we're gonna work on the legs. Just like we did with the back of the head, we're gonna close this one up. I'll tell you what, a drawstring closure is probably one of the most useful skills that I ever learned. I use this so much, like to close up hats. I use it for amigurumi, all kinds of things. The rest of the work really comes with running the needle around the opening just a bunch of times. It will really close that off even better if you're looking at it and it kind of looks a little weird or wonky. So we have that ready to go. Let's look at our finished bunny here so you can see how these are going to function. Essentially, we will have one piece of yarn that we're going to double over and go back and forth a few times, and it's going to go straight through one leg, through the body, out the other leg, and then come back. And then what we have is something that can bend and straighten. And then you'll need a scrap piece of yarn. For this one, just get a whole handful of it. Don't worry about it being a certain length or whatever, because you'll want this to be really secure. So using more yarn is a better idea. I would say a good rule of thumb is to sit it upright and sit your legs roughly where you want them to be. I like it being a little bit more than halfway, so just a little bit closer to the back of the bunny. On your leg, I would go at least 3 rows down and pull that through. You will have a little bit of a tail. Just go ahead and leave that there, but leave it long enough that you can weave these in. And then again, get your body situated. Don't worry, this isn't permanent either. You can easily remove it. I have gone up about 1, 2, 3, 4, so between 4 and 5 on that side. This is the hardest part, especially because these needles aren't super long. As long as you don't let go of this side, you should be good until you have the other one in hand. There we go. And then pull that. Roughly. We're pretty well matched in the back. I think we're in pretty good shape. Okay. Look to the other side here. So this is where the yarn was coming from. You want to go back through, and we're going to go all the way through the entire thing another time, but you don't want to go through the same exact hole, because then you can really just work it back out. And once again, I'm going to just go through the leg first, so that way it's a little bit easier to go through the body. See, I've stuck it through roughly the same hole on that side, and we'll go roughly, there we go. Okay. Then you can really crank on this. See how that, I don't know if you saw how that really scrunched and pulled that in, like made a pretty big dimple. That's what we want. That gives it the shaping that makes it look better and not just like two pillars stitched to a body. But you're not going to see the same result on this one until we either tie these together, which you can do, or you can run it through again. I don't know how we did it either, but somehow I think everything is relatively straight. We have our arms and our legs matching, and they're not like crooked from one another. So get it on the first try if you can. Right, Freddie? Now, since we ran this back and forth a couple of times, it's pretty secure as is. If it makes you feel better to tie it off, you can do that. Otherwise, you can take the same approach that we've used for a lot of our ends, just poking it through and then coming back out and trimming that off. Now we can still use this tail to attach the buttons. But since we're working with chunky yarn and smaller buttonholes, I am going to take the yarn apart here, unply it. And I'm not super worried about doing that because this button isn't going to be structural at all. It's not going to hold anything together. It's really just there to look good. I knew that was gonna happen. We need to find a smaller yarn needle. Did you just jump up there in the middle of my video, honey? You did, didn't you? Ready? What are you doing? Honey, what? You think I run this operation? She runs this operation. Where exactly do you think you're going? She had to come and say hi. She's not liking the fact that you all can't see her anymore when I make videos sitting over here. Roughly speaking, the ears are in line with the eyes, and they're a few rounds behind. And the first thing I'm going to do is just grab a stitch in the head here to tack it in place. So the other thing I'll continue to do is use the outer loop of the outer side of the ear. And I am using a whip stitch for this because I think it'll look longer I think it'll look better in the long run. But you can experiment. If you know of a different stitching technique that you like better than this, then yeah, there's really no right or wrong way here. It's really just what looks good to you. I tend to think if you pull these stitches really tight too, it'll look a lot better. But again, just experiment. Do whatever looks best to you and whatever feels like the most secure to your bunny. I'm not 100% sure if this is the right size eye, but still pretty good. I'm gonna leave this attached in case I change my mind and I want to change it at all later on. I'll have the ability to do that. I think I'm happy with that. I do think there is still some tweaking that needs to be done on the nose for sure, but I'm pretty happy with this. This was a total experiment. I really wasn't sure if this was going to work with this yarn and if it would work with a chunky weight yarn in general. I think I do prefer the original yarn just a little bit, and just because it's the lighter weight yarn. I do think a bulky weight yarn is probably the better way to go for this project, because honestly the floppiness is really what makes this bunny just super cute, and it's a little bit harder to get that same kind of floppy effect when you have a yarn that's a little bit more chunky and a little bit more dense. No big deal, this was all a total experiment. I still think it turned out super cute. Once again, the link to the free pattern can be found in the description below. I'll have that linked there. Also, if you want to support the channel, or you like to have the convenience of a printed copy, or you like to have a pattern saved to your phone or your tablet as you're working, B.Hooked.com is our shop for all of our PDF printable patterns. We also have some pattern bundles if you want to get a few projects for spring. We also have some t-shirts as well, if that's your thing. We have the classic B.Hooked tee here, available in this gray. We also have it in a white, and our Crochet is Cool tees. I'll have links to all of that in the description below. Thank you so much for watching. Happy hooking, and I'll see you in the next one.